Let's say you've never used a camera before. You see some cinematic crazy shit and you're like, oh, I wanna make those. It's too much to bite off. Like what you're better off doing is just trying to silently consume a bunch of stuff, create a bookmark folder, and then find a pattern that you like that hopefully isn't visually tied, because if you can't replicate the visual, whatever, but more like the storyline pattern or the rhythm or the pacing. And then the key is like, what topic do you make stuff on? It's very hard to get someone to go from Instagram to a podcast because their native consumption on the Instagram island is short form or feed posts, and the native consumption on the podcast is either long form YouTube or audio.
Before we start this podcast, I have one little favor to ask you. Can you please hit the subscribe button down below so we can help more people every single week? Thank you. All right, man, let's kick off. So where I want to start is, I'm curious to know, how much did like your stint try to become like a rapper prepare you for the content game?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I talk about this a lot. Like when I think about putting content together, there's a lot of factors that matter in terms of like subconsciously, does someone want to consume the piece? And so conscious is like the visuals, how someone looks, like how they're coming off, you know, with the eyes. But there's a lot of like in the subconscious level that's influencing someone's brain to say, should I flip through this to go to the next one or should I stay? One of the biggest things in the subconscious is rhythm. And like people don't really pick up on it, but the pacing of the words as delivered is either soothing for the brain or chaotic. It's like one or the other. And because and you can almost hear it in my voice now, like because I rapped and produced music and like learned how to fill the pocket with words and different syllables and like almost like dance around, when I deliver content, whether it's short form or like I have my own podcast or on YouTube videos, when I deliver the content, it is very rhythmic in a way. And my goal is for that rhythm to sound like a soothing instrument to the person. I think when you think about content, it's basically like a lot of variables. Either the baseline is they don't disturb the person enough to have them churn, or they do. It's not as though it like builds me an advantage. It just doesn't, it's not a disadvantage. So if you hear someone talking a ton, almost like they're speaking like a run-on sentence, no pauses, no periods, no commas, like in the way they talk, it's very chaotic to the brain. And so someone will churn faster. Similarly, if they're talking way too slow and the pauses are way too elongated, someone will get bored and churn. And so I think there's a few things that come from making music and rapping. The biggest one is the pacing and the rhythm. The other one is just like, I kind of think in metaphors. My brain is just completely wired to think in comparisons. And so that's really helpful on a podcast, I found. So like either when I'm a guest like I am now or on my own show, when people are just talking, like I'm real time just like processing and like coming up with interesting comparisons of like, oh, let's take this explanation that's a little complex and hard to understand and break it down using this other completely non-related thing. And my brain just works in that way from the rapping.
Man, that is literally insane. I was thinking about that the entire time when I was consuming your content before I even listened to your story, because I'd just seen like a lot of your videos and I had noticed that the way you speak was so clear, but it wasn't in a way of just clarity, right? It was like the sounds, the tiny small changes, and you speak incredibly well, which is insane, right? Just to be able to think through your own thoughts, because usually for me it's about clarity of thoughts leads to clarity of like speech. But I didn't even consider like tonality. I didn't consider pacing. I've never considered these things until I saw your content, which is why it actually drew me so close to it. So before we even get into those, in contrast, how much do you think your days in consulting has benefited your content game?
Well, the best thing about consulting is that I know what I'm running from and I know how annoying it is to work in consulting. So there's a fire breathing dragon that I'm never going back to. So it's helpful in that sense. I do think though, consultants are the good consultants are exceptionally good at taking complex, messy things and structuring them through simplicity, right? So like you go into a project, you have no idea what's going on. All the data's all over the place. Nobody's giving you a straight answer. You go to all these interviews and then you take all that jumbled mess and you distill it down into a few slides to tell a story. That's basically what consulting is over and over. And I think most of life is that too. And like content, especially internet business, especially, you're really just trying to get crystal clear on whether it's copywriting or content or any form of expression. You're trying to get crystal clear on a message and continue to grind it down. So I do think consulting is super helpful for that. Just like a way of a way of approaching problems. Um, but there is a lot of nonsense in consult. I know you said you worked at Accenture. There's a lot of a lot of not best practices, we'll say.
Yeah, 100%, man. It's a fucking it's just like it's something to do if you don't know what you want to do, right? And that's what happened to me. Like I was in startups when I was like 19, 20, and I loved it. It was really tough. And then I bought the lie. I bought the ticket, I bought the lie. I'll put my hand up and say that. And then when I went there, I literally I couldn't believe what I was doing to some degree. And I barely suffered through 2 years. Now I know you were in like the innovation lab, which in Accenture in Ireland in particular, there was nothing going on, right? There was nothing going on there. But it's I heard you mention too before about how like you didn't really build real skills. And I remember when I went into the online space, I remember even following people like Dakota Robertson, hugely influential in my journey, and he was always talking about like you have to build skills, build skills. And I was like, well, what are my skills? I didn't really have a hard skill like like sales, writing, persuasion, like anything, man. Really didn't have anything, which makes me kind of think, what is it you're building in those careers, right? Because my kind of fear about this is that if you lose your job, which bear in mind tens of thousands of people have done in the past year, you're actually left to some degree with nothing, right? Because you're going to go looking for another job. It's not like you can move into the online world and almost broker your skills. You can't, right? That was kind of the struggle that I have had, and that I'm speaking to people a lot of time. And I think a lot of people don't realize this, right? They don't realize that sometimes it doesn't prepare you for what could happen down the road.
Yeah, I think in a career like consulting specifically, the best outcome is that you never leave, and then you really like the skill the skill is you're learning how to play the political game so that you can best position yourself to have like a comfortable life while you work as you ascend. But yeah, the it's I think consulting as a career is the biggest gap between something you think will produce skills, whatever that means at the widest assumption when you go into it, and like actually producing skills. And I know that's true because if you talk to people that are anywhere between like 3 and 7 years into a consulting career and they try to leave, it's very, very tough. They almost always have to they either go to the internal consulting function at a big tech company and like basically get bailed out, right? They're doing the same type of thing, but luckily they found a role. There aren't that many of those roles. Or they take 2 steps back and go basically back into an entry level role or like equivalent in a vertical, like whether it's marketing or product or operations, something where they can learn a tangible skill. So yeah, I think the fallacy, or like when I went into it, I just no one's there to really teach you when you're younger. So you kind of just like fall into a path based on curiosity, and then you have to learn these lessons the hard way. But like the truth is, if you really want to build real enterprise value, which if you're listening to this, you probably want wealth. And so if you need enterprise value and own equity in something to have wealth, if you want to build real wealth, you have to have hard skills, because the only way to build enterprise value is through hard skills. So the only way to build hard skills is to either go to a school or YouTube for that technical skill. I would recommend YouTube because YouTube has everything. Or build a product, like actually build something that requires you to learn the skill to build it. I'm always a fan of the latter, right? Like just go through the process of building something. And if you wanted to build it bad enough, you will learn the skill, or you'll find someone that knows it that will teach you. So I wish I started that sooner. Like I spent 2 years in consulting, and then 4 or 5 years, basically running an internal startup at the consulting firm, which was not the same as like a real startup. And so when I came out of that after 7 years, I really didn't have hard skills, which was pretty frustrating.
Yeah, it's so interesting, man, because even when you're that close to a startup that but you don't even own it, you're not exactly like learning trial by fire. And the biggest exposure that I've had was, well, my podcast was 4 years ago, but I was like messing around on Shopify in 2015, 2016. I was making sales on stuff, and I was able to see like get a product. What was I doing? Basically like vintage clothing that was coming out of Italy, selling it through like the UK. And it was really hot 2015, 2016 for music festivals. And that was like for me the eye opening, right? Like how to make $1 online just opens your brain. So it's kind of like everything else seems like a little kind of trivial. So I just think it's quite interesting because like you don't notice it happening if you're just stuck in genuinely the matrix, man. Like I know a lot of people that are stuck in that mindset and they're dependent on other people. But to your point, like enterprise value, real skills come externally. Now, there's nothing wrong with if you just want that type of lifestyle. But I think for a lot of young, ambitious guys, they get caught in that vortex, and it's almost trying to detangle it through their 20s before you almost can't in your 30s, right? There's just things come up. I'm 28. Like a lot of things just come up in your later years. So I'm interested for you because I know you're big into brand building and looking at even like clothing brands, and you know you're a big follower of people like George Heaton and stuff. When was the first instance for you that you made like your first dollar online?
Yeah, so I mean, so basically my whole backstory was as I was working in the consulting firm, my whole goal was I don't want to do this and I'm going to launch stuff on the side, funnel all the money that comes from the consulting job into these side ventures, and then eventually one will hit and I can leave and run it. That was kind of like my goal, instead of, because I had founded a company coming out of college and we did that first. We ended up selling the assets. It wasn't like a huge outcome, but I had the startup bug. So like I knew I wanted to build companies, but I also was, I guess, smart or dumb enough to know like jumping into the entrepreneurial space with zero clue, zero idea, zero ambition for a certain project is pretty dumb if you have no cash flow, because you'll just burn out all your free cash flow while you try to figure out what to do. So a better, I guess, like a hedge path is take a job where ideally you're learning some skill, although I wasn't, and then spend every other waking moment other than the job trying to find what that thing is going to be, either doing research on the industry or like building prototypes. So that's what I had been doing the whole time. So what was the first dollar I made? The first thing I did was like launch a podcast where I interviewed founders. So I made money, like some money on that through like AdSense or like affiliates, but it was like small dollars. The first real money I made was in crypto, doing various things. I launched a crypto project that was designed to be like a lifestyle brand on Web3 rails was the idea. So I wasn't one of the like schemers, but so it was actually it was tough to win as not a schemer because there was so much noise and like nonsense going on that it was tough to cut through that. So we didn't do that well on that, but I think that experience was definitely eye opening to like, yo, the rules are way different than what, and like I had my corporate job during the day and we were like trading crypto at night. So it was really interesting. But I think my first like real internet money has come through this like content path. And I think something that might be helpful too is explaining like, okay, if you buy into the narrative that we're talking about you need hard skills, like most people can hear what we've said and be like, okay, I agree, I need hard skills, I don't have them. Like, where should I start? That's kind of where I was. I picked content because, and I can explain like my framing around like why I think it gives leverage. But at the time, the most valuable hard skills that I think you could learn 3 years ago were either software engineering or full content stack. Now, software engineering, I think, is going to become less. It's still going to be important, but I think it's going to become less rare because of AI. In the next year or two, everyone will be able to build anything with one prompt. You'll still need software engineers, and I think it'll 10x software engineers, but like to close the gap is less rare versus the content leverage. So I chose content, which I'm pretty happy about, but we can talk through that if you want.
100%, yeah, because I was the exact same, right? I was looking for something that was like high leverage, but didn't involve me just sitting in like a dark room building like another e-commerce store, right? It was like something that I could almost meet people with, grow, and also get better. And then for me, it was like long form, which was like the ultimate like grind, right? It was like no result, no result, no result, no result, until like episode 50, to be honest. So for me, I was learning sales, what I was doing, because I was able to sell myself, get people on my show, write good messages, do good outbound. And to be honest, that's helped me so much in the future. So walk me through your philosophy in terms of like how you actually got started, but also like what you were learning with intent through that process.
So yeah, I mentioned that, I don't know if this was before we started recording, but I had a podcast where I interviewed entrepreneurs. It was called The Founder. And so my goal was like, I don't know anything about anything, but I want to build a media skill set. So this was like my first foray down. And I was like, I'm super into entrepreneurship, super into startups. I really am not getting any conversations with these people at my job. Like, let me launch this podcast as a way for me to just get in touch. It's probably a similar story to you, right? You just wanted to like have the conversations with people that were like related to what you're interested in. So I started doing that. I did that every week for 50 episodes or so. And it was definitely growing, but like linear. There was no explosive, no stepwise, but it was like slow linear growth. But at some point, like after those interviews, I realized I was like, there's no difference between these people that I'm talking to and me. Like, there's zero difference other than they just picked something and did it for a decade. Like, there were a few that I talked to that were like, holy shit, they're really impressive. But the majority of them were no different than you, me, or me. Like, they really weren't. And so as I was talking to them, I was like, okay, I could take this path of like being the guy that talks to founders, but I was like, I'd rather be the founder. I don't really want to be the like guy that talks to founders forever. So I stopped that podcast mostly because I wanted to like focus the effort somewhere else. But that gave me like a little touch into like what the media skill set would be. So similar to what you're saying, how do you do cold outreach? What does it actually take to like get a podcast uploaded? How do you make sure that the quality is good? Understanding the gear, like basic stuff that's like helpful in media. And so I would say that was like my step one. And then when it came time to, I left Deloitte. I guess it was only 9 months ago actually, but I started making content 18 months ago. So when I started, I still had a job there, and I was like definitely checked out. I would like work for the first half of the day and then make a video for the second half, and I just did that
Same.
every day.
Man, sorry to interrupt you, but our stories are like identical, as in almost identical. Like I could do something in like Accenture for like honestly like 40 minutes, and then I would spend the next 4 hours working on my podcast. Do you want to launch a podcast for your business, but you don't know where to start? Remove the stress, pressure, and all the overwhelm that comes with it by working with Podcast University. If you're an ambitious individual who wants to build your influence online, grow your own podcast, and also stand out from the crowd, Podcast University is for you. We help you with the strategy, equipment, the content, your guests, everything you need to create a top-tier podcast. If you want to learn more, check out Podcast University and start your podcast journey today.
Yeah, that's exactly how. So when I started, I was my thinking was like, when I started, AI wasn't even, there was no ChatGPT. So like AI was being worked on in the background, but no one really knew about it. So I would say that wasn't like a factor in terms of my strategy or anything, but I had launched all these things into the abyss with no customers for the last like 4 or 5 years. And I didn't have enough of an audience to even get feedback if they were worth continuing. So it's not even though like I wanted to earn revenue from those products. It was just like I wasn't even getting in the feedback loop of if I was on the right track with anything. So I was kind of like, all right, before I build another product, because I could just go, my mentality was like, I'm going to go forever. Like I'll just keep building these products until something hits. But I was playing the game poorly because I just wasn't even getting the feedback. So I was kind of like, let me stop building and just zoom out. It's all you need to win is like a good product and distribution. That's all you need to win. So I was like, let me just focus on the other one. So I'll just focus on distribution. So what would that mean? And I was kind of like, I think the highest signal thing to do is have video of some kind. And I looked at the options, which were long form podcast, medium form, medium form is like YouTube, 10 to 20 minute videos, like long form YouTube, or shorts. Those are like the 3 video options. I had already done the podcast and knew it was like brutal to grow. And it's really, really hard to cold start a podcast. Like you've done it effectively, but unless you're willing to wait 5 to 10 years, it's like very hard to do. YouTube, I made my first video. If you go back on YouTube, like my very first video was like my plan. It was like a 10-minute kind of like, here's how I'm going to build a holding company. So I wanted to try to see like what goes into it. Dude, making YouTube videos is so hard if you have no idea, if you don't have the video skill set. There's just like the editing time is forever to make it look good. And so then there were shorts, and I made a short. I was like, oh, took 3 hours. Like in one day, I went from idea to ship, and like that felt good to like close that loop. So I was kind of like, all right, shorts is the easiest way for me to get feedback quickly, because the YouTube video took like 2 weeks for me to make, and I really didn't enjoy it. And so, yeah, I picked shorts. And then after the first like 10 shorts were trash, like horrible. Like if you go back to my channel, scroll all the way down, like you'll see it's like very embarrassing to look at, honestly. But I don't know, something inside me just said like, there's something here. And this was before a lot of people were blowing up overnight, So people like you had like the D'Amelios and like all of those huge like TikTokers had gotten big, but there was no like B2B short form content that had ripped yet. It was like right at the beginning of that. So I was like, all right, let me just keep going. And then I think my 20th video, I had one get like 30,000 views or 50,000 views or something. And that was all it took. I just needed one in my mind to be like, I'm just gonna never stop doing this, because the dopamine release from it working and having the idea that morning, shipping something that night, and having 30,000 views one day later, that dopamine cycle was pretty sick, like no lie. But also, I just started projecting like, okay, if I build distribution and I have hundreds of thousands or eventually millions of people who listen to what I say, I can pretty much build and sell them anything as long as I have high trust. So that's what got me started down the route. And that now we can go through like, it's been definitely a turbulent. I was like straight up for the first 6 months, and then trying to figure out, okay, how do you backfit a business model onto this? Because the views are very much, it's very, I call them empty views. Like short form video, you'll get a lot of views, but they're empty views. Like there's not a lot of high intent action coming from those views. And so the real game is like, you want to go wide and deep. And so if short form is your wide, what is the off ramp to get somebody deep? And like, who is the wide to get them to an offer? I didn't really approach it that way. I was kind of just like, I'm going to make whatever I'm interested in making, no niche, no category. And that was good for views and growth followers, but it was bad for like angling a monetization. So yeah.
There's so much in there, man. And I love, this is exactly where I want to take this, because that trust, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is the trust in short form. Empty views is a great way to put it, because I say that it's very difficult to articulate the views. You know, if I'm looking on Instagram, like, are they real? Or especially on YouTube. Instagram is a little bit different, but on YouTube, I feel like, are these even real views sometimes? And what I kind of was struggling with was thinking, is short form for a podcast going to be helpful for the podcast with the conversion mechanism? Like, do people come over and become loyal fans? That's one thing. That's another conversation. But the other side was just trust in general and the depth, right? Our big philosophy is all around influence and authority. Like, how do we build influence and authority? And I feel like writing is actually really high ROI for that. Like, you use Twitter, I use LinkedIn. Vehicles are relevant, right? For me, I feel like that writing really pulls people towards you. And I just didn't feel that having as much of an impact on short form. I'd like to get your thoughts on that in terms of building that loyal cult following
Yeah.
on short form.
Yeah. And I have an email newsletter that I write weekly. So, and I write long form writing on that. So I also have perspective there too, of like, right now I have the short form, I have the long form email, I have a podcast on YouTube. I'm like trying to get into the middle forms, the medium form YouTube. So I'm like all over the stack. My take is, so I have this like framework around portability, like audience portability. So basically, like what the internet really is you have a bunch of these islands. So like Instagram is an island, TikTok is an island, YouTube is an island, email is an island, and you're building like populations on each island that like follow you for whatever you post there. And the dream as a creator, like someone, an entrepreneur building a business online, is that you can create, I call them ramps. You can create ramps from one island to another, and you can transport followers easily from Instagram to email or from email to your course, right? And so the thing to analyze is like, there's certain ramps are really shallow. So any vehicle or like any person with almost no nudge could get over from one to another. Other ramps are very steep. Like a $300 course purchase is an extremely steep ramp. So if you make a short on Instagram and your call to action is like, I want you to buy this $300 course, the ramp is so steep, you may only get one or two people that could climb up it to actually do it. Versus if the ask was like, hey, here's like a free download template to help you like make content ideas. That's a very much more shallow ramp. And like, these are not novel concepts. Like the whole like lead funnel thing has been around for a while, but the framework of thinking of it as like separate islands and trying to connect them is really helpful. And so I say this because we have a podcast. I've been into podcasts a long time. I like look at the shorts and stuff. I think it's very hard to get someone to go from Instagram to a podcast because their native consumption on the Instagram island is short form or feed posts. And the native consumption on the podcast is either long form YouTube or audio. Those are apples and oranges. And so to get somebody who's in the moment consuming shorts and enjoying that experience, to break that flow, even if you have the best clip of all time, to then take the ramp over and listen to like a 60-minute audio experience or even like bookmark it for later, that never happens. Like people say it does. And I think people try to lie to themselves about like, oh, well, if I make a podcast, I can also cut it into shorts, so I'm getting a 2-for-1. But the reality is like nobody is watching those and coming to your long form. The only way to use short form to get someone to your long form is to make a native short form piece that isn't a recut, or like if it is a recut, the first half of it is like specifically shot for shorts. And then you maybe like use some of the, recut podcast footage if it's like really high quality. But that's only to build an audience on the Instagram island. And so I think the people who are doing it best, like let's say Diary of a CEO, I listen to Stephen Bartlett's a lot. He does use clips, and maybe occasionally one out of every 1,000 watches a clip and is like, oh, I should listen to the podcast. But I think what he's just doing is building huge authority on Instagram so that he can take someone off a different ramp. And that ramp could be him selling a book, or like him selling something else that's not as friction heavy as the podcast. So that's how I think about it. But I will say, like, I've seen podcast clips, like the 17th clip I see from a podcast on Shorts that I've never listened to. If the funnel is clear and like I can go to the description and like learn the name, maybe I'll look it up and like try it. But oftentimes that's not the power use case.
Man, I love that a lot, because the way I kind of would view it is that you're not putting out clips on Instagram to get people to go across at all. You're putting out the clips to build your influence and authority, and then it's keeping top of mind so that then in a week's time they're like, oh, like Darren recorded another podcast, let's go check that out then, because they'll consume at the point of when they consume, right? Like I write my newsletters Saturday morning. I might listen to a podcast on a walk, but I'm not going to convert when I'm in the middle of my work on Instagram to go over and listen to the podcast. Does that make sense? So it's like top of mind, putting in the reps, just keeping like awareness. And then at some point, then people know that, okay, there's this repeatable content coming out on every Wednesday. Therefore, when I want to consume, I'm basically going to go and engage, right? But of course, there's outliers. I think there's outliers to everything, and that's what people focus on. Like Chris Williamson, the guy from the UK, he's based in America now. Like obviously, his content is blowing up continuously. But to your point, like people are not watching the clip to go over. The way I kind of think about this too, right, is that I really like your point about creating native content, because that's what a lot of people in long form don't do, including myself. But when we do it, like I've been recording a couple of raw videos, and I know you've had experience with this too, and they've worked really well, right? Because there are a lot of the frameworks that I would use in my podcast anyway, or use in writing, probably the best frameworks, and I would cut them up. And the reason why I'm saying this is because the videos we would use from a podcast are just standalone. It's not like, hey, go listen to my podcast or go check out my newsletter or whatever. It's just like, here's my framework on how I approach long form.
Yeah. And that just leads them to following you on Instagram, which then you can ramp them off maybe some other way. Yeah, like you said, maybe they'll listen a week from now. Or what's a lower friction ask than like, give me 60 minutes of your time right now? It could be just like a free download, or it could be you could sell a $20 product, and maybe that is lower friction than like 60 minutes of their time in the moment, So there's I think if more people looked at it that way, you can still use the podcast content. Well, the other thing is like most podcast shorts are just noise, right? So like people, the truth is most podcasts, like 90% of it is not that interesting. And of the 10%, it's really hard to cut that into a clip because the phrasing and pacing of the delivery wasn't good enough so that if you were to mimic a short, it would be so choppy that it wouldn't be good. So most people then what they do is they're like, oh, well, I want to get 5, like they work with their agency and they're like, I want to get 5 clips out of every episode. And the 4 of those clips are just garbage. And like, then they'll post it and it would just be junk. And then all of a sudden that authority ends up being linked to like, oh, this is like just low quality. This person just putting out junk, which is a loop you don't want to be in. So I do think it's really hard though, because like we said, podcast discovery is very low. People start podcasts because they want to grow them. They need some discovery. So like, how do you connect those dots? It's just a very hard problem. That's why you don't see that many big podcasts.
Yeah, man. There's a 1,000 ways to kind of slice and dice it, right? I think that to your point, you need to get better at speaking, right? You need to get better at becoming someone of delivery and be able to articulate your thoughts. And that's why for everyone, I'd always recommend like working on their story, working on their frameworks, working on their authority pieces, so that they can show up and almost deliver it. Now, I want to get your thoughts on that, because like, how does someone improve the tactics side of short form, which is the pacing, the storytelling, the hook? Like how do you think about that? Because your build alongs are really fascinating around this.
Yeah. I mean, the best way to improve at writing is like copy work, right? So you find a piece you like and you literally hand write the exact thing line by line, and it trains your brain to think in the phrasing and pacing of that writer. That copy work's been going back like a concept that's been popular for many decades. That's the best way for writing. So I think something similar for short form video could work also, which is like you go and consume short form video for several hours. You kind of like bookmark the things that you naturally feel gravitated to. It's not necessarily the things that look the best. It's the things that you end up watching to completion, which is usually made up of some concept of visual, audio, the subconscious pacing, the storyline, whatever. create like a bookmark list or like a saved list of 20 or 30, and then really analyze those. Like, what about these drew me to it? Is it the relatability, like approachability of the tone? Is it the format? Is it the type of topics they're talking about? Is it the delivery style? Like, whatever it is. And you basically just try to find a pattern, because whatever that pattern is whatever your brain connects with. Then you can start trying to mimic that through your own content. So then you're just like, all right, my only goal is to make one rep as good as I can, following the pattern of these, because like these ones got me. So like, if I like these, I need to make something that others like similar. Because I think a mistake people make is like, you go down the feed and then you see something that's crazy, like let's say you've never used a camera before. You see some cinematic crazy shit and you're like, oh, I want to make those. It's too much to bite off. Like you don't have that, like it's just not. It's not an incremental step. It's like a huge major stepwise change. So what you're better off doing is just like trying to silently consume a bunch of stuff, create a bookmark folder, and then find a pattern that you like that hopefully isn't visually tied, because if you can't replicate the visual, whatever, but more like the storyline pattern or the rhythm or the pacing. And then the key is like, what topic do you make stuff on? Because I think most of success in short form just comes down to the idea. Like, is the story frame novel enough, hasn't been told enough, that when someone who is the right audience watches it, they're like, that was interesting. Because that's really what you're going for, is the that was interesting moment. So my tactical advice on that is walk around for 7 days, carry a notebook, and just anything you find yourself thinking about or talk, like getting into a casual conversation with someone about, or like your friends, just write that down in a notebook. At the end of 7 days, you'll have like 5 to 7 topics that these are the things you actually care about. It's not like you're trying to force quantum physics that like you don't actually care about at all, but you think there's a good monetization at the bottom of that funnel. Actually start making content about stuff you think about, because it's going to take you more videos than you think to get good enough for it actually to work. And if you pick a topic you don't give a shit about, you won't stay in it long enough to let your skills catch up to that point. And so that's the easiest way with a topic. And then I would just combine those things, right? You've got a topic you care about. You have like a pattern of types of videos, types of stories that resonated in your brain. Try to combine that and make the best rep you possibly can. Post it. Do that again 50 times. If you do that, you should start to have some traction one way or another, like some signal that, oh, that topic's not interesting enough, or I'm not picking the right ideas in that topic, or like my story frame is actually not that good, right? But 50 reps is what I'd aim for initially.
Love that, man. The way I kind of think about this is like, I would recommend people not to start a podcast unless they can do it 100 times over, because everyone has an idea, everyone has a big idea, but it's like, can you really execute on that, or just iterate even on that continuously for 2 years, right? One a week or whatever. So it's a really good frame. I like how you talk about kind of leaning into what you enjoy, right? And even like documenting this. If you're familiar with Storyworthy by Matthew Dix, you'd actually love that book on story writing, on storytelling. He recommends creating like a story diary, and I just call it like a founders like folder. So I have like a spreadsheet which is actually open right now, and it's like you capture 5 minutes of that day, like the moment, the 5 minute moment of the day. So it could be sitting on the sidewalk, just having like an ice cream with your partner, or it could be interacting with your dog, or like whatever, or like a big win in the business. And as you document the stories, you have like one per day. Then you can go back over the course of a month or whenever, and start seeing like the pattern, like what's your big story moments that you want to even relay. And I found it just so helpful to crystallize my own thoughts and realize like what is the stuff that I enjoy, right? Because a lot of things go back into like health, wealth, and relationships, but then they subdivide, of course, and subdivide further. So it's almost like you can kind of find that blend of what's working for you. And that could be other things too, right? Like I know you go on about brand building. That could be like looking at a Nike ad, or like an advertisement or whatever. But it's like you need to document that versus like looking at complete noise and not being able to see what you want to do. And I recently was following Justin Welch's approach on like his newsletter writing, which is quite similar to mine, which is like throughout the week we're looking for signals of what's working. And you do a reflective look on your content, and so do I. I'll do a weekly deep dive, usually with my biggest problem, like generally. And last week was like, how do we get more leads from content? So I was able to document that entire process down, look back on a week's progress, and see what worked, what didn't work, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that's a great way That's a great way to mine for ideas, and for long form especially. I think that's like you can't go wrong with that, right? Like any YouTube video, podcast, email, newsletter, I consider all those like longer form. That's the best way. I think that's the best way to mine for stuff that's actually high signal.
And also, what's important is like to figure out what's helpful, right? And that's what I always get kind of got caught on too, because you don't want to be consuming all the time. Like you're someone who's creating continuously. I want to ask you about the building the audience. So I mentioned before about transferring overviews. How much you think it's applicable to go like long form to short form? Like, do you see that kind of attrition happening?
It's very tough. I've tried to make, and I haven't been super consistent with YouTube videos. I hate editing video. Like if I'm being super transparent, and so right now I'm just a one man band. Like I don't have an editor, and so any YouTube video I've made has been an absolute slog, and I've like hated the process of making it. To be honest,
You should get an editor, man.
yeah, I
Why don't you
no,
have one?
I'm in the process of finding. I've tried a few and they weren't a fit, so I'm about to nail one down. But um, yeah, so I've spent a lot of time making a YouTube video, and then I've tried so many things from the short form to long form connection, right? That ramp. I've tried so many things to try to get that to work. I have tried, just making the IG story post, which is like the lowest level of effort. That basically doesn't work. I've tried making a dedicated short form video native about the YouTube thing. That worked pretty well using ManyChat as the integration. So I don't know if you've used ManyChat, but super powerful like Instagram automation tool. So basically a good example is the build along, the Stanley Cup video. So I put a ton of time into making sure that was high value. And so I didn't want to just like post a story, and I wanted to test if ManyChat worked. So basically what I did to be super tactical, I made a short form video basically explaining that long form video existed. So it was like, if you make content, this is my whole blueprint, open sourced, and all my tips and tricks are in this video. But then instead of being like, go to YouTube or, I'll link it in my bio, which I think there's just so much attrition, I was like, just comment Stanley and I'll send you the link. And you use ManyChat. And so anyone that comments Stanley, it auto sends them a DM with whatever the message I want. So like I said, hey, here's the link. And then the link was in their DMs, which it had like a 60% conversion rate, I think, so basically like there were 3,000 people that commented, or I think there were 3,000 DMs. So like half of those were me responding, hey, I'll send it to you. So there's 1,500 people that commented that they wanted it. And then 60% of those, I believe, opened the DM and clicked through. And then like a certain percent of those actually watched the video for a certain amount of time. But ManyChat, so the truth is like, if you want high conversion, you want one-on-one messaging. So either text or DM is the best way to get people to actually click your thing. And so that was a really good, that was a good experiment or a good situation where I took a tool, experimented with it, and tried to create a smoother ramp, right? So like very high friction ramp, typically IG story to YouTube. Nobody wants to do that. They're flipping through stories. They're not going to watch a 20-minute YouTube video. Tried to decrease the slope of the ramp. So like all I had to do is just get them to comment Stanley. Instead of go to YouTube, I just wanted them to comment, which is an action that they would typically do. So it's smoothing the ramp. Then I got to their DM, and in the DMs, people are willing to click out because like DMs, you're looking for things to go do other things with. And so I think it's a helpful frame, honestly, to think through, is like that island ramp idea.
Man, that's insane. I'm gonna start using that right away because yeah, that's exactly what I've been looking at. Because even yesterday, created like a lead magnet around that LinkedIn Shorts thing I was talking about, and it was again sending them a link that they were reopening. Now I didn't use that automation tool, and I want to get your thoughts on, is there any kind of risks with using those? In terms you get like blacklisted or whatever, but it's been super effective. We had like 60% open rate. A ton of people watched the content as a result. It was just a Loom video. I always do those kind of Loom breakdowns and go through like, a mirror board or whatever it is. But being a bit more intelligent like that just puts you in a category of one,
Yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
nobody's doing shit like that, especially for YouTube, right?
Walk through what you did. So you made a video about the LinkedIn Shorts thing, and where'd you post that?
Yeah. So let's take a step back. So, and I actually did two different videos. So one, we've been doing like, everyone knows that we create long form content, but our second platform that we warm up for people is LinkedIn, because it's generally like the highest like leveraged for like people to do like B2B business. So when the news kind of came out for that, I wrote like a long form piece of content on LinkedIn that was actually quite like splitting the audience. Was like, you can get left behind, do the old style, or you can move with the new style. If you want to move a new style, be an early adopter before the feature is released. We have like a complete system that we're using, which is exactly what we use in the back end. You can comment down below. I'll send you the video. So we had a bunch of comments on LinkedIn. I also used it on Instagram too. Instagram story. We had people like direct access to the link. And the last aspect was on Threads. Threads for me is working like incredibly well. I don't know why. So put up a long form piece on there and had like a CTA, and again message people, respond to people on there. I think we had like a couple of hundred signups in the first 24 hours. And that wasn't automated, it was just manual. It was just like me, system without a similar message. I didn't even hear about those tools because my fear with those tools is the fact that I don't want to plug something into Instagram, because like Instagram just always gets deactivated. I've had 2 accounts already deactivated. I'm just fearful of that shit like fucking shutting me
I
down.
think so. Yeah, ManyChat only works in Instagram, so that wouldn't have helped with the LinkedIn stuff. But so I think if people are constantly being like, "Yo, comment this and comment this, comment that, comment this," and it starts to become spammy the way your content comes off. But once in a while, I think it's very powerful. And I haven't seen anyone use that and then get deactivated by Instagram. Like I only tried it the one time. It worked so well. And I'm kind of like picking my spots. I've seen people use it in their bio where like they just say there's always on constant call to action in their bio that's just like DM me this or comment this on any of my videos and I'll send you the link. And then I've seen people do it. You can also do it with Instagram stories too. So you can be like, you put up a story and then say comment with it. Yeah, I think it's interesting, but the blacklist thing is definitely worrisome, right? Like it's not, I'm sure if you overuse it, I could see them doing something.
Yeah, I've never actually used it until that moment, which was only like 2 days ago. So that's why it was like super effective. And it's all about just using much more intelligent ways. Because if everyone's going this way, you want to go that way, right? You want to find your zone of genius. You want to find your competitive advantage, and that's why we were just very big on that on the shorts for LinkedIn. Just because I've seen what's happened for Instagram, I've seen what's happened for YouTube. Like if you think about it, right? YouTube and Instagram have completely re-engineered their platform on the back end to benchmark off TikTok that now, anyone can blow up. Whereas before it was kind of like the opposite, right? And it's like this, we're just in a very unique stage whereby if you are someone like yourself who's a key person to influence and you do know your shit, you can move quickly on this stuff, right? Because 4 hours of your time to condense this knowledge down is the equivalent of someone spending a year doing it elsewhere. So it's just being a bit mindful of that. And that's just on the monetization side, right? It's like, how do we position ourselves as the key person of influence? Because otherwise, like, the way I can think about it is like, if you don't do it, it's going to happen 2 weeks later and someone else is going to take that idea from you. So you can move quicker than people if you already have the knowledge in your brain.
Yeah, the LinkedIn Shorts thing is I've got LinkedIn open over here. I need to check that out because I think, yeah, LinkedIn's a very underutilized platform for me because like I said at the beginning, my kind of personal brand approach at the very start was just like, yo, nobody knows who I am for anything. The best way to make the best content is just to pick stuff I'm interested in, even if it doesn't tie together. And so that led me to make like, Leo Messi sports deal, Taylor Swift this, AI that, like all over the place in terms of content categories, which actually like the engagement on my videos was higher than almost anyone I've ever seen. But the follower growth, it was good, but it wasn't as explosive as it could have been because I was so disparate. Like if someone sees a Taylor Swift video, but then clicks my profile and sees I'm talking about AI over here, they're like, oh, I don't want to follow this guy, but I really like that Taylor Swift video. And so now what I'm trying to do is compress back down to like, I'm trying to get real clear on like, who is the audience that I'm trying to build so that I can do what later and then gear all my content. I don't want to like get too narrow, but like gear all my content, funnel it into that. So like LinkedIn, I want to start using LinkedIn to target some kind of B2B audience, that goes along with my shorts. So I definitely want to check that out.
Are you an entrepreneur who wants to build your influence and authority online? You may have tried some of the hacks and tricks, but none of it has worked. And it makes sense. 90% of podcasts don't make it to episode 3. Of the 10% that are left, 90% of them don't make it to episode 20. That's where Voix comes in. Voix creates, manages, and grows your podcast for you on your behalf. If you've not been getting leads, not been growing consistently, you haven't found your tribe, and you don't know what to do, Voix is the answer. Don't just take our word for it. In the past couple of years, we've managed over 35 podcasts. We've also been able to generate over 55 million views with 500 episodes produced. And not only that, generating over $1 million for our clients in products, services, and sponsorships. So if you want to learn more about how you can build a great podcast and have it fully managed for you, schedule a call with me at Voix and we will help you achieve your podcast goals. And yeah, we kind of brainstorm that too, right? Because I was in a similar position. It was just creating fucking podcasts about business. And then our media company, doesn't serve 99% of people that have ever existed in the entire world, right? Because it's like B2B, it's a B2B service. So then I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to create videos on podcasts. It's going to be still in entrepreneurship, but it's going to be telling my story, sharing my values, sharing what I'm interested in. And then people will come along as a result, right? It's like, I don't know. It's like there is that separation, which isn't an issue to some degree. I thought it would be an issue, but it's actually not, right? So the reason I'm saying this is just because, that's why I think your lean on messy videos work really well on Instagram and YouTube, because it's kind of like a younger audience. But my audience is at 25 to maybe 34 bracket, young guys that want to be entrepreneurs or first-time business owners. And that's kind of like enough. It's like enough in that bracket, right? Versus like super, super close demographics, because like otherwise it's just interesting, right? Otherwise, you put yourself in a position whereby it becomes like a grind. You're just doing this for the sake of selling the course in the back end, right? Which I think is not what your reason for doing it. You're much more following curiosity. Same with myself,
I'm
right?
trying to build products at the bottom though. Like my whole goal was starting when to go to the backstory, like my whole goal from the beginning was I want to own a portfolio of products and services that I sell to an audience that I acquire for zero CAC or low CAC. That was the whole premise. And so I enjoy making content. I'm very creative. I like the process, but like, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that like, I'm not just a guy that's going to be making videos for 20 years. Like I very much want to build products at the bottom. And so I'm in this weird middle ground. I thought it would take 5 years to get to where I'm at now. So I'm at this weird middle ground of like, I haven't really built the cult fandom that you need to support an owned product, but I have the numbers that would suggest that. And it's principally because the short form video has like this outsized algo tailwind. And so over the last 3 months, I've definitely been thinking like, all right, let's kick the tires on a product. So then I go down the road. I just had a gut feeling that like my audience wasn't durable enough to support it, try to figure out what the product could be, go back to the drawing board. Now I'm back to like audience, build the cult. Because at the end of the day, like 5 years ago, if you took 18 months of content creation like I have right now, you'd probably be at like 20,000 followers. And a lot of those people would be like very robust, diehard fans. You would have had a lot of churn, but like you have very small numbers. I have like 500,000 followers across platforms, but it does not have the depth that I expected it would have with this big of a size. So I think it's something that like I haven't seen anyone really talk about is a trade-off or like unexpected reality of the way that the algorithms are rewarding growth is people won't have the depth. Like you shouldn't compare follower numbers apples to apples when you're comparing yourself who's been doing it for 5 years against someone who's been doing it for 1 but has 5 times the audience, because even if they have the audience, the depth isn't there to sell through. And so like unless they're just a hobbyist video maker, they're not going to be able to sell through to that audience for a product that they own. So it's an interesting dynamic. I think the answer is just you got to keep making content in that grind mindset, even though you have hundreds of thousands of people watching, and you have to deepen the cult over years. This is really the only way.
Yeah, man. It's like a lot of people that I speak to, a lot of like big entrepreneurs, a lot of the business they have comes from the content years ago, right? It's a snowball compound effect.
Yeah.
And like we obviously know this, but it's almost like less to do with the content, but more to do with you developing the relationship. Like as we talked about previously, putting the time in with your audience so that they just know that you're going to be around. And I think one thing that's benefited me a lot was the fact that I haven't had shiny penny syndrome or whatever it's called, with other vehicles. It's just been like this. And the reason why I did that was completely intentional, because like I didn't want to be like someone who runs multiple offers and we're doing this and we're doing that, because I see those guys.
Yeah.
Right. I see those guys doing it, and I don't want to like name names, but I've known people that have completely lost trust with their audience because like they have this offer, then they have that offer, and then they're throwing stones at someone else, but now they're also in that bracket, right? So it's like you're confusing everybody.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be the short form guy forever. It's just the fact that you have to be the person who's committed to it, right? And yes, I love the podcast medium, but like I'm an entrepreneur at the end of the day, right? I kind of think through that lens first. But it's just this is a really good opportunity for people to be able to tell their story and their journey. Now, let's get into some of the monetization stuff because that's super, super interesting. So the way I view this is that I feel that people who have small audiences can basically build like a tiny, small, like kind of cult, like a very, very small cult, just based off like who they are and their experiences, right? And therefore, as a result, a low hanging fruit is a higher ticket offer, right? Let's say you are, let's just do an example, you're a copywriter and you have a copywriting content framework that you're sharing. It's going to be almost easier to get one person to pay you 3K and then two people to pay you 3K and three people to pay you 3K to get the 10K a month versus selling, I don't know, $100 product
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
selling that. How much times do you do it? 100 times, right? Like that. And that was my story, right? It was the fact that we just started doing high ticket stuff, 3, 6, 9, 12 month packages. And it was almost easier to build. And the way I kind of see this is like when you reach critical mass, whereby the demand is higher than the supply, because it's just you in a done for you agency model, that's when you can add in like cohorts, coaching, group coaching, so on. But it's almost like to alleviate you of the pressure that you feel in the done for you. And that's just been very helpful for me because it's almost taking the pressure off of like, we need to have so much views to get so much people to click through to hit a course.
Yeah, I mean this is a really interesting convo because I'm pretty yeah, I'm very open-minded on the monetization, trying to figure out what makes the most sense. I think the to go back to what you said, the reason why a bunch of people end up having multiple offers and confusing everyone is because they don't do the math on the first one and they end up launching something that's too low priced, and then they get to scale or like expected scale and the amount of money they're bringing in is not enough. And so they're like, shit, I can't scale this low offer bigger because it's already at what I felt like it could support. Especially like there's certain business models where like you are hard capped, and then certain ones where you're like, yeah, I just exhausted whatever the potential market size would have been of this offer for this like strata. So then they launch multiple things. I'm still like trying to figure out what the right path is. I've experimented with, so like obviously I have brand deals coming in for the content for like sponsored videos and like AdSense and affiliates. That I think is like table stakes, I would say, for anyone making content. Like you're going to get those requests, especially with short form, you're going to get those requests. But if you think like one level up of what can you sell where you don't erode trust, that's like detached from your time input. That's really important to me right now. I don't want to erode trust. Like 10 out of 10 trust has been my number one thing the entire time. And I think I've done a good job of that with the shorts, but I also haven't launched anything. I haven't sold anything yet. I've only given. So I've experimented with like, all I do is go B2B and I sell like 5 to 10K a month packages where like I just become like a fractional head of content. You just plug me in. It's more strategy based. Like I don't really want to edit people's videos. And then I can be like a lead gen engine for a video editing service or placement or whatever. That's like the obvious consulting model, I would say. I haven't really turned that on because it's not super interesting, but that's there always. And then there's like the thing I'm probably going to do is launch a paid membership that is principally designed to help people level up their content. But the expectation in terms of the product is not me driving daily chats like in Slack or me producing a certain minimum amount of courses every month. It's literally just live consulting at scale. So what I mean by that is I'll have 1 to 2 calls a week where anyone in the community can join live. And if you join, someone's going to randomly get picked to go up on stage with me, and I'm just going to help improve their content live. So like if it's a business and you're like, yo, these are the videos, break them down, but anyone can watch and like that'll be recorded. For me, like that type of stuff is like more interesting because go back to the rapping, I just like freestyling. Like I like when people ask me questions I haven't prepared for and trying to like figure that out on the fly. Like that's fun for me. And so that's something that's interesting to me. All these other business models, other than like owning my own products and brands, are not that interesting, although they probably are the right move, right? Like the high ticket price, you only sell to a few people, you're at 30K a month. So I'm still trying to figure out like what makes the most sense, because I imagine you have a team, right? And so like as you've scaled the high ticket offers, it's probably awesome. You have the team executing it. You're probably selling it in, focused on the content, and then the money prints. So that's definitely like, I think that's compelling at maturity. We'll say like once you have that, I'm like, that's sick to have. I don't know if I want to go through the process to build that.
So there's a few ways to look at that. So just looking at the community side. So I think the community side like crushes, right? And I whenever someone thinks about like how much is involved in I call it group coaching, like one to many. I always think about Sam Ovens. So Sam Ovens, when he ran consulting.com and his masterminds, he did nothing. He told everyone as well who ran masterminds to do nothing, but to sell the program. And then on the calls or on the meetings or the meetups, everyone asks the questions. You come with the problems, and he
Yeah,
solves them
exactly.
because he's a key
That's
person
that.
of
That's, I
influence.
didn't know he did
That's
that, but that's
exactly
what
it,
I want
right?
to do.
He would literally sit there. It was like a 2-day mastermind. He told Chris, Christo, right? Christo is awesome creator. You should definitely have him on your podcast. He's a fantastic guy. I spoke to him a couple of months ago. He told Chris basically, Chris didn't do this, but he told him to run a creative entrepreneur podcast mastermind. Day one, people ask the questions, and day two, you ponder on some of the things that were asked and you respond. Basically, that was it. And that's how you're going to get the best kind of ideas from. And I know a lot of guys that run like these community pages, and it's exactly the first thing I recommend, because if you come with all the ideas and this is how you do a hook and stuff, it's just solving kind of the wrong problems, right? It goes back to almost being in school, right? It's like we want to learn algebra because we suck at it, but this person's teaching me trigonometry. It's like I want to know this, and this is why I pay for private tuition, which I actually had to do for this exact reason. And it scales. It's a really good model. It's just very hard to go 0 to 1. However, we've launched a few community pages for small podcasts, and they've smashed it. Some of them are on Discord, got like 500 people in the group on a zero membership, and then the back end then is coaching, paid
So it's
coaching.
free, a free
So
membership, and then you upsell coaching.
yeah, so it's $0 in, so we were able to fill that up, and it's a lead list, how I describe it. And then we had low ticket courses at like $400, group coaching at like 2K, and then one-to-one coaching that solves a specific problem in their business for like 10K, basically. And I think that model works really nicely, and it scales just very kind of elegantly, because you can still come and get all the free stuff, right? We're not saying no to people. We're just saying that if you want to pay, it's pay to play from that point forward.
It's a lead engine or like a, yeah. The question is, if you were to make that paid, if you were to make that front part paid, what do you think a fair price monthly for that is, assuming the Sam Ovens? Because what I was thinking about doing, to be fully transparent, is 2 calls a week, an hour each, that are literally that, right? I didn't know Sam Ovens did that, but that's funny because that's exactly what I was going to do, which is like, I have a ton of knowledge in my brain and an ability to problem solve in this domain well. Come to me with whatever you have. I'll live answer, and also everyone watching can like absorb that for their own and like adapt the solution for their own problems. And it gets saved in a repository, right? A searchable database where same question comes up another time 6 months from now, we have that clip there. Like what do you think is a fair price for that?
So it depends on the consumer, right? If it's people going 0 to 1, I think like that $37 is just such a nice monthly reoccurring. And my kind of advice on this is to jam pack it first, like hit your first 1,000 true fans in the community, add in the payment, add in the cost, or add in the payment. You get a 20% churn roughly, and then you have 800 people paying you $37 a month, and then you have all the high ticket one-to-one stuff, because there will be people that will just say, fuck this, just give it to me, just give me the one-to-one stuff, right? That will happen, right? And you'll open yourself more to that exposure, and it's going to be less more like fractional COO kind of like heavy duty stuff, just more one-to-one stuff. And it's a snowball effect. The more you build your influence in the community, the more you build your influence with the group coaching. People just want that natural. It's what's it called? It's a offer ladder or whatever
Yeah,
it is,
and
right?
dude,
Just
there's
continues
so
adding up.
many things people need at a high, like you can charge a high, it doesn't matter what the price is. There's so many things people need one-to-one because they just don't have the ability to close the gap themselves. And so even if the community is free, I was thinking about doing the first month free, then like you said, introducing a paid tier, some level of churn, but I've demonstrated so much value in the first month and like proof that it works that a lot of people would stay. But the whole goal is you're not trying to break the bank on the paid membership. The paid membership, anything I sell, I always want it to feel like I'm giving 10x value for what the price is. That's what I've always thought. So that's awesome. But then there's, for me specifically, if it has to do with content, there's so many long tail, huge services that people will need. People who are running brands come in, they need videos edited. Boom, there's a video service right, or like a full agency, full editing agency right there. They need talent for on screen clips. Boom, there you go. You can have a placement agency. They need editors, like bodies in the building. Boom, hiring it. Like there's just so many things that you could offer if you want to go out and build that whole infrastructure. So that's what I'm going towards.
It's a combination, right? And just to go back on, you were mentioning about my kind of offer, just because it just kind of completes like the circle on this. So we started off doing that high ticket stuff, right? And just because I was like, I need a way out, right? I wanted to get out of the tech world. I knew we had a lot of interest in people because everyone would just be like, hey, like, how did you do this for yourself? Can you do it? But what I felt was that when I was doing like one to one consulting, because it's so tactical, like you need to make podcasts this way, people just didn't have the information or the skill. So that's when we started executing on their behalf. And then we got to a point whereby we were just below seven figures a year. And I was like, oh fuck, like trying to scale this from here is tough. And like people say agencies are tough to scale, but that's cope to some degree because they don't know how to do it, right? It's a complete different ball game when you get into 10, 20, 30, 40 clients. The role changes, like as you're not someone who runs a business anymore, like you're a CEO. So we had to make a decision quite recently, which was like, are we going to go big and try go really like big and broad and start build that MRR continuously, which we decided to do, which is like, okay, we're trying to go from like 10, 20 to like 30, 40, 50, but have the same execution level, which means bigger team, bigger systems, bigger processes. So that runs. Okay, that's like one machine. You're trying to scale that. I do believe that that does a cap out of like 3 million a year. I just don't, I don't see a viable path whereby you can get above there without crazy performance bonuses. But then on the flip side, when you have that being built and that is built, the other idea then is you can insert the coaching. You can insert group coaching, which is come much lower, and people will graduate from the group coaching up further then. But they're two different things, right? And I think you do need a roadmap and a plan in place for that. Just the fact that everything works, right? That's the thing, is that this all works. Is the fact that if you pick that vehicle, you're gonna need to make a few changes. And last thing I'll say on this before I keep rambling is like, there's that kind of philosophy with kind of coaching on its own that, oh, it's a super small team and all this. Like I know some of the like good guys, man, that still have 20, 30, 40 employees just because it's becoming more complicated to fulfill community plus coaching now because not for you specifically, but the traditional approach is like, let's say it's like 6K or 8K. You still need a closer unless you take the calls. You're still going to need a setter. You're going to need someone who does customer experience and helps them. Some more people to like run the operations, and then it's going to be a bit of a headache. So what I'm trying to say is that all business is difficult, right? And all of it requires some help, whether it's fractional or freelancers. It's just the fact that there's honestly no escaping some difficulty unless you get to that higher echelon. Now, there's of course nuances to it, and there's outliers to it. But I just mean for someone like myself, I'm much more comfortable having a team because coming from the consulting background and coaching them versus like slaving it out on my own effectively.
I'd much rather have a team. I agree. I agree. That's definitely
Even for yourself, man, like with the editing that you do right now, right?
exactly. And that's basically the first phase was, can I learn the skill at all? Then the second phase was, can I apply the skill at leverage? Then the third phase is like, can I get myself out of it? Right. So I'm like just getting to the third phase where, because I've been very conscious that I don't want quality to drop off, and quality is a very subjective thing. It's like it could I can't tell you the amount of editors that I've trialed for my shorts to try to get this off my plate, and just the quality never came back where I wanted it. And like even if the market didn't know, I would know that like it was not as good as it could be. So that could be an Achilles heel as well, that I think good is better than nothing, right? If you're going for amazing. So it's an interesting game though, interesting dance.
It's part of that creative. It's like the creative kind of mind, like the kind of Rick Rubin approach of a beginner's mind as well, because the flip side to that, the more like economical side is like Jim Collins, which I think it's like you want like to get someone up to like 80% or 90%. And it's like 90% is like better than like you doing it yourself. So it's almost like if you do build someone or you bring someone in, you expect there to be like a tiny variable drop in performance because like they're not you, right? They're not the expert. They will become better for sure, but you have to like almost forfeit that to some degree or do it yourself. Um, I don't know. It's just interesting. It's more like a sobering conversation around it versus like, yeah, just build a team and remove yourself. Like I have a mentor at the moment who is like super against removing yourself from your business. As in like, he's made like 200 million with his agency. And he's like, yep, the reason why we did it is because I wasn't out of the business completely. I was still, and he was telling me a story how he was setting up like someone's GoDaddy server recently. And the dude's like CEO of a massive company. And he was like, the reason why is because I can do it. It saved me, I could do it in 5 minutes versus handing it to a assistant that would do it after lunch break. And I don't know, it's just interesting, right? Is it to see what level you want to play at?
It feels like there's many routes. There's many routes to get there. It just depends on like, yeah, I think it depends on the style, like just like the management style, implementation style. It varies, but I think you can win at all of them.
Also depends on what you want to achieve, right? Like if you wanted to build like a six-figure business, a seven-figure business, or you want to do the portfolio approach, which is like multiple businesses. And how do you think about that now? Because that's where you wanted to originally start with. Like how do you envision that playing out?
Yeah, I'm not too sure to be honest. I think it's easy when you have nothing to say like I'm going to build a portfolio. I think the most important part of the portfolio is the engine at the center, which is the cult fandom. If you have cult fandom, and and we've seen this with obviously like at the upper echelons, Logan Paul, Mr. Beast, but even as you go down, like once you have the cult fandom, it's very easy to like partner with an operator and build a spoke. And like all of a sudden, for a decade, that person had nothing but content. And then after 2 years, they had 6 businesses that were 7 or 8 figures. Like it just flips so quickly once you decide. So I'm still in that, like I don't want to be too naive or too ignorant to the fact that like I'm still in that I got to build the cult in the engine. I'm very much on the way and I know the path is there and I'll get there. So I don't know yet. I don't like to play too far in the future because so much can change. Like just even not platform risk, but just like platform adaptations can change the strategy so much. So right now I'm just like laser focused on, can I build a super deep cult around the type of like stories that I tell and like the type of topics that I cover, mostly people who are interested in content marketing, brand building, entrepreneurship, like that kind of vector. And if I can do that at scale, hundreds of thousands of people that like can't wait to see my videos every day, I think the rest should, like I'll have to partner with operators, but the rest will kind of solve itself, I think.
For sure, man. And the way I kind of describe this is that, it's easy to look at Mr. Beast, but someone like Alex Lieberman from Morning Brew, you know, he left Morning Brew, he was writing for a ton, and now he's like, he calls it like multipreneur. So he had like the ghostwriting agency, which just popped up overnight, and he got it like 1 million in like a day in like annual recurring revenue, right? Because of like, he has his brand and everything. Greg Eisenberg does something similar. Matt Gray does something similar as well. Like a lot of these guys just built that content machine and then they still feed it every single day. You mentioned about the risks. So let's talk about that. So what do you think is the biggest risk to short form today?
I don't think there's a risk to short form. I think, well, TikTok may get banned in the US. I'm not sure about that, but something new will pop up. I think the consumption pattern of short form is never going away. Like people have just tried the dope too much. Too many people have tried the dope and they're just like addicted to it. So I don't think short form as a medium is going away. I definitely don't like being singularly focused on any one thing. I just think it's better to have awareness elsewhere. It's like I'll never be like only on one platform. I'll never make content only in one medium because I think that's just too close-minded. But yeah, I mean, I think most things in life are a barbell. And so like if you think about content, the most highly sought after content right now is hyper short form and then hyper long form. So it's like I either want 1,000 bits of a topic covered by anything. I don't care who they are, what they're saying, just like feed me. That's like the short form thing. Or I want to go super deep on one topic or with one person and I want to hear everything they have to say and I can't get enough. And that's like the long form podcast. Not to say there's not a place for the YouTube video, but you even see like Mr. Beast is shifting from like 20-minute cracked out videos to like he just said the other day, like 40, 45-minute with like story and character. So I think we're shifting. I think we're going barbell and I'd like to be playing on both ends of that. I really like podcasts as a medium. So like I enjoy hosting it and short form is kind of like where I started. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I try not to get too attached though to anything. I just like reacting and just like making the best possible thing I can that day, and I think it'll all work out.
100%. Before we finish up, I wanted to ask you about that kind of interest you have with, you follow like cult brands and how they kind of build, and what's attraction there, like, so what's attraction for you to that, and also what's the attraction to cult brands?
I mean, I've always been like obsessed with brands. Like my whole I don't know what it is, but like my whole life I'm just very interested in I think it boils down to like human psychology. So like if there's one thing that I'm interested in, it's why people do the things they do, and not necessarily like the sinister side of like trying to manipulate that for negative ways, more just like at a broad sense, just like there some people are very good at persuading others to do something, and the people, brands, like etc., all the way up the stack. I think human psychology is a fascinating topic, and content is like never really thought about it this way, but content is like a free market experiment on human psychology at scale. So like every day, millions of pieces of content are made from people who are trying to get large groups of other people to do X action through their words, visuals, display. I just think it's like fascinating. So from a content perspective, that explains why I'm kind of interested in it. But then from a brand perspective, a brand is nothing more than like a made up set of beliefs that they got a lot of people to buy into. And so that also is like human psychology at scale. And so I'm just like very fascinated by how someone can sit with nothing, manifest something from their head, create a brand around a set of ideals that they made up, and then create this like cult following around it. I just think it's like a fascinating idea. And so studying it is helpful because I'll make my own brand. I'm like, I'll be building my own brands as we go. But I think just like understanding the intricacies of like why people do the things they do is super powerful.
That's so interesting, man, because like a lot of guys will not have that front of mind when they're creating content. They're just like, oh, like just fucking chug this out and see what happens. But if you're thinking through like a brand perspective, and I've looked at it from like the category of one perspective, like how do we have like really high customer experience and customer service, but I like how you're doing it from more like a consumer good perspective, like the Gymshark, the Represent, that kind of style, because that's led really well into your personal brand, having that high level of integrity, high level of trust, and almost kind of building a brand around that. What kind of influences would you take? Is there any specific books you could recommend on brand, or even the type of content you're
I
making?
don't read a ton of books to be honest, but I think watching the cult brands that you like, watching their behind the scenes stuff. So this I actually made a short about this and I posted it like an hour ago, ironically, but George Heaton with Represent, Marcus Milione with Minted New York, and Nick Bear Performance Nutrition. Those are three people to look up on YouTube. Look up the company. Nick Bear is under his own name, but the other two I think, or Marcus is under his own name, but George posts under Represent. The common trend, which I think is so powerful, is it's the day in the life vlogs of the founder, but it's done in a way that's not like the Logan Paul style. It's more just like these guys embody the mission of their company to a T. Like there is no difference between them and the brand. And visually packaging that through like a long form, come along with me, or like you're over the shoulder. There is no more powerful unit of content to like red pill someone into your cult than that, in my opinion. So watching them do that, I just think it's like you can read all the strategy and framework books that you want. And honestly, most of these brands incidentally became cults. Like I'd be shocked if every move from these people was calculated. I think a lot of it was like their best attempt at the time. And then they just got lucky with some random tailwinds, but then they created the cult and fed the monster. The best way to study how they're feeding the monster is to watch the behind the scenes content that they're making, because it shows like, it just shows that the best way to build a cult is to visualize the mission, and you need a leader where there's no difference between the leader and the brand who's exuding that mission visually. It's just like a fascinating little thing. So I think every business, whether it's consumer or B2B, should have content, whether it's short form or like horizontal YouTube, but like 5-minute bursts or whatever, should have content showcasing the ideals of the organization through the human, like through the leader. I think that's just so it's such a powerful thing that we're gonna see a lot more of.
I love that, man, and that's also bakes into the culture of the company, right? Because the culture isn't like what you say or your values; it's how you show up, right? So if the leader of the cult is exact same, and they embody it, right, and they, so like someone like George Heaton, you know, he's fit, he's sharp, he's focused, he has like he's super diligent in what he's doing, he never misses a beat. That's represented in the brand, how they show up with their products and services and growth and everything, and the way he gets ahead is just by living it, by basically living it, and the culture within the company. Do you attract the right people? And there's lots of other examples of that as well, you know. But yeah, man, this was awesome. I don't want to run on too long. We've been burning on for about an hour and a half so far, but I want to say a big thank you, man. I'm very excited to see how you're going forward, and I'd love to see how you even build out some brands going forward. And always happy to help too, man. Just anything that you're struggling with monetization or any ideas like that, you want to run some ideas off, always feel free to just let me know.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.